will help. Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to answer your first question, and that is, why is he wearing a robe? And the answer to that is that I like to. And the reason I like to is because in America, only judges get to wear robes. The lawyers don't get to wear them. So I try to wear my robe as often as I can. I wear it to the cafeteria. I wear it to events like this. I wear it in the lobby of the tribunal. And anyway, I'm wearing it tonight. So I wanted to ask this question about, do international courts deter atrocities? Because to me, that's really the basic question of why we ought to have a court, an international criminal court. I mean, other than, if it doesn't deter atrocities, then it's basically just a full employment for lawyers and judges. And so we hope, all of us who work in this international criminal law field, that what we're doing is more meaningful than that. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about that question, and I'm going to give you the defense counsel's perspective through the eyes of three of my clients, and then I'm going to tell you about one of my heroes. Well, first of all, my story begins in San Francisco. I was a federal prosecutor in San Francisco for 10 years and a criminal defense lawyer. And in the year 2000, I had a daughter who was 11 years old who had grown up in the same house and gone to the same school all her life, and I wanted her to be a world citizen. And so I looked around for where I could do something related to criminal law, and that's how I first heard about the tribunals in The Hague and the Rwandan Tribunal, which was located in Tanzania. I thought it was a little bit drastic to take my family to Africa, so we settled on The Hague. And I went to the ICTY, and I tried to work there. This is the ICTY building in The Hague. I had no job. I had sent in my CV and asked to be assigned as counsel for somebody, but nobody ever chose me to do that. And meanwhile, my daughter was almost going to be a teenager, wouldn't want to hang around with Dad. So we just finally picked up and moved there for a year, hoping that I could do something related to international criminal law. And I'll tell you, it was tough. I was there for 5 months, riding my bicycle to the court, watching the trials, and trying to become involved. But the people who were there from the Yugoslavian conflict, they get to choose their own lawyers, even if they're publicly paid. And they wanted lawyers from their own country, their own ethnicity, who they shared a common language and trust with. And they didn't really want Americans or people from other countries. And so after about 5 months there, I started to think that this was going to be a rather uneventful sabbatical in The Hague. And so I decided to write a novel. And I wrote one called The Tribunal. I claim that it's a legal thriller, but I don't think it's really that thrilling. But it's basically, I wanted to have something to show for that year so that when I came back to California, I didn't come back with my tail between my legs telling my friends I didn't do anything that year. At least I would have something to show for it. So I wrote the novel, which was a lot tougher than being a lawyer. Anyway, finally, after a lot of trial watching and networking, I actually was asked to work on a case in which I had watched part of the trial. It was almost over, and the two lawyers from Serbia needed somebody to write their closing brief, which had to be in English. And so I ended up getting assigned to work on a case of this man, Radovan Karadzic, who was a general from Bosnia who was charged with crimes in Srebrenica. And even though I had 10 years of experience as a prosecutor and another 10 years as a defense lawyer, I tried over 150 jury trials, it was the fact that I was a native English speaker that got me this position. So you never know what it takes to get involved in something that you would like to be involved in. And after working with General Krstic's case for a while, my family and I moved back to California. And meanwhile, though, I had the bug about this international criminal law. And so when I had the opportunity, I worked on other cases, and I've been doing it now for the last 12 years as a defense counsel, both in The Hague and at the Rwandan Tribunal. Now, I'm going to tell you about some of my clients, and the first one is this guy. This is Radovan Karadzic. He is currently on trial right now in The Hague, charged with genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes for the events in Bosnia in 1992 through 1995. And I see him every day because we're in trial together, and I asked him, really, were you deterred at all by the establishment of the ICTY, or this tribunal? And his answer was no. And he said the reason was that it seemed to him to be completely political. He was first indicted in 1995, right after the events in Srebrenica. A second indictment was lodged against him in November of that year during the Dayton Peace Conference, when they were considering granting immunity from prosecution to him and some of the other people. And then when there was international pressure to remove him from office, the tribunal convened these Rule 61 hearings to get an international arrest warrant for him. And so it seemed to him that every time the international community wanted to put political pressure, they went to this court and they got some kind of piece of paper or some proceedings started. And so he didn't find that the court was credible, and he didn't believe that a court that was used that way, which he considered to be really not legitimate for a court, was a deterrent. But it did deter him individually because he had to spend 10 years in this disguise. This was how he lived after an arrest warrant was issued by the tribunal, and the countries that had the UN forces on the ground in Bosnia decided that they were going to arrest him. So for 10 years he lived in Belgrade under the name of Dr. David Dabic. He was practicing alternative medicine, and basically he was underground for all of that time until he was arrested in 2008. Now, this is another client I've had. His name is General Dragoljub Ordinic, and he was President Slobodan Milosevic's chief of staff of the army during the Kosovo events in 1999. In that year, after a number of thousands of Albanians left Kosovo and NATO started bombing, President Milosevic and 5 of his leading officers in both the military and the police were indicted for crimes in Kosovo. And General Ordinic was prosecuted at the ICTY, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And he's serving that sentence right now and is appealing his conviction. And I asked him whether he was deterred by this indictment or by the existence of the ICTY. At the time of these crimes in Kosovo in 1999, the ICTY was already in existence for about 4 or 5 years. And it had jurisdiction over all of the former Yugoslavia, and yet these crimes occurred in Kosovo. And he also told me, first of all, that he thought that the ICTY was political and not a legitimate court. He was also more concerned with being killed than he was being prosecuted. This is his office in Belgrade, and that area where the most damage is basically where he was working. And so NATO was bombing and trying to kill him, and he didn't have a lot of time to worry about whether or not he was going to be indicted. But he also said that the timing of the indictment, it was used in conjunction with the NATO bombing. It was used to put pressure on President Milosevic and the Yugoslavs so that NATO could end the bombing and they could withdraw from Kosovo. And he also thought that it was not a legitimate court and one that wouldn't deter it. He thought the indictment was a propaganda tool against him and the other leaders. So those 2 clients really didn't believe that at least the courts that existed at that time were a deterrent. Now, this is my 3rd client. This is Joseph in Nyerere. Joseph was the president of the Congress in Rwanda and the Secretary General of the leading ruling party called the MRND. And these are the Interahamwe, who were the youth wing of his party. And at the time of the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, there were no international tribunals, so I couldn't really ask Joseph if he was deterred by anything that they had done. But I got to know Joseph very well. I represented him for 8 years before he died near the end of his trial in 2010. And during the genocide, when it first began with a plane crash of the president of Rwanda, Joseph actually, after a few days, called together the leaders of this youth wing, the Interahamwe, and had a meeting with them and told them that he wanted them to go around to the roadblocks and tell the people to stop the killing. And they did that, and the killing actually stopped for almost 6 or 7 hours before the rebels attacked Kigali and the killings all started up again. And Joseph was almost considered a traitor for having done that, and after that kept a very low profile and didn't really do much to try to stop the killing. And knowing him as I know him, or got to know him, I believe that if there was a court in place in which he believed that he would be personally accountable for failing to punish, failing to prevent crimes, I think he would have done more. Maybe would have shown a little bit more courage, taken that extra step to try to do everything possible to stop those crimes. And so, from my own experience, I think there is hope that these international courts can, in fact, serve as a deterrent. Now, this is the ICC. That came after these Rwandan Tribunal and the Yugoslavian Tribunal. And from the anecdotal evidence that we have so far, it seems like the ICC is actually being a deterrent to crimes. People in Africa are very aware of the ICC. People are conscious, even people who are not that educated, that no matter how powerful their leader is in their own country, no matter how undemocratic their system is, including their judicial system, that they might be hauled someday to The Hague and be held accountable. And there's that hope and there's that belief that in fact justice can come to some of these places no matter how powerful their leaders may be at the time. In Israel, people are concerned that they could be referred to the ICC if war crimes are committed. It's at the top of the agenda in the UN right now. And so it seems at least that there's hope that the ICC is serving a purpose of actually getting people to modify their behavior and serving as a deterrent for atrocities. But it has to be legitimate, because as you can see from Radovan and Dragomir, a court that's simply being used as a political tool and is not legitimate is not going to have any deterrent and is not going to be accepted. And that's where I and my colleagues from the defense bar come in. This is basically what we do. We stand in front of the prosecutor, the NGOs, some judges, and we are trying to fight for a fair trial. Because in these international tribunals, unlike domestic courts, the odds are stacked so much against the accused. They come there with a narrative that they're the butcher of Bosnia or the killers of Cambodia, or whatever. And so many people have already investigated the crimes on the ground, talked to witnesses, given all that information over to the prosecutors. The prosecutors have themselves amassed millions of documents and built a case for many years before finally this one individual is arrested. He shows up in the court and he's given 2 lawyers and a small team and given, in Karadzic's case, more than 2 million pages of documents and told to start defending themselves. And so it's very difficult to get a fair trial under those circumstances, even with the most well-meaning of judges. Certainly we have one right here. So that's what we do every day as defense attorneys, is we fight for our client's right to have a fair trial. And that motivates me whenever I'm sitting in court wearing this robe to absolutely, no matter how heinous the crimes may be, no matter how difficult emotionally it may be, to sit and listen to the suffering of people who clearly didn't deserve what had been done to them. I'm the only one in that courtroom that is the champion of that individual sitting next to me and the champion of a right to a fair trial. And if I don't do my job, if I pull my punches, if I don't stand up and fight for the right for a fair trial, there's nobody else that's going to do that. And so that's what I do every day. Now, I want to tell you about one of my heroes. That woman right there, her name is Jessie Smith. She was an intern for our team in the Karadzic case. And she's from Australia. She went to law school in Melbourne. And she came along with now over 150 students from all over the world to help us on the Karadzic case, because we simply don't have the funds to pay people to work on the case. And so we have to rely on students or people who have just graduated from law schools like this one to help us to fight for our clients' right for a fair trial. And in working with Jessie and other people like her, it's absolutely amazing the commitment that they have to make a difference in the world, whether it's for a defense team, for the prosecution, for an NGO. In Jessie's case, she would get up every morning and run with me at 6 o'clock in the morning. She'd go to court, go to work in the tribunal a full day. She was, in the meantime, doing all kinds of other things, including starting an NGO that made these bags in Tanzania. She found some women when she worked at a refugee camp who had HIV positive and had been ostracized by the community. And she decided to try to get them sewing these burlap bags and selling those bags in Australia and other places in the world. And she started an NGO all by herself so that the women could have some income, could have self-esteem, a productive life, and it's called SEW, Self-Empowering Women. And this is just one of many interns that we've had that have done remarkable things in the field of international criminal law and for international human rights. And we even had one from this law school, Anna Marie Brennan, who came last year and worked on our team in The Hague. So if there's anything that you take from this evening tonight, besides the issue of the fact that we have the ICC now for 10 years, and we hope that it actually serves to deter atrocities, is that I hope that you'll think about how you can make a difference. Because we all have our daily lives and our daily routines, and we all have our daily worries. And I'm now almost 60 years old, and I feel that trying to make a difference, at first I tried to make a living for most of my life. Now I'm trying to make a difference. And I found that it's the most satisfying, most worthwhile thing that I have been able to do in my career, is to do something I love to do, that I'm passionate about, and at least hope that I'm making a difference. These are some of our interns who visited the Republika Srpska in Bosnia. We sent them to interview Dr. Karadzic's former bodyguards. And so they went to a place called Pale near Sarajevo. The man behind, the older man, is the mayor of Pale. And they went to interview these witnesses. And they did that job with such enthusiasm and with such dedication that it's, to me, exemplifies what we have as a future for international human rights and the International Crimnal Court. And this one right here, that's my daughter Jennifer, who I'm proud to say has become a world citizen. Thank you very much.